Hey guys, so I am back down here in Washington County, Utah, looking for the Mojave Poppy Bee. My wife was down here about a week and a half ago, surveying for the poppy populations and looking for any pollinators on them. So I just need to interrupt myself for a second here. I should say my wife Lindsay really is leading this project this year. So she's worked in biology almost all of her life, both as an environmental educator and as a researcher. She's the one that actually introduced me to bees. She got me my first job at the bee lab and introduced me to Olivia, who I write all my books with. So anyway, this really is the project that she's leading and I'm kind of tagging along with it. So the poppies actually bloomed a little early this year. We're in a really bad drought here in Utah, actually across the West. And so we were kind of worried that there would be almost no bloom. So she found some really healthy poppy populations, caught some sweat bees on it, no Perdita, well, none of the Perdita that we're looking for, these Mojave Poppy Bees. So I'm not sure what we're gonna find this year. It was interesting because last year, some of those poppy populations that I showed you in that series of videos when I first started looking for this bee, a lot of those populations where I found a lot of poppies, my wife found almost none. So this drought has really kind of changed the dynamics of where these poppies were. And some of my colleagues that are working on this same bee down in Clark County, Nevada, around Las Vegas, they haven't found it yet this year either. And last year, they were finding pretty healthy bee populations down there. So I mentioned in those videos last year this idea of bet hedging in bees. So some bees can remain in diapause, kind of in this suspended animation for multiple years because they don't want to come out as adults if there's no flowers for them, especially these specialist bees. And so it looks like these poppies, these Mojave Poppy Bee populations, at least down around Vegas, are not really emerging this year. At least not anywhere near the numbers that we saw them last year. So anyway, my wife and I are down here looking around. It's really dry. That's Beehive Dome. Last year, that whole front of the hill there was just covered with poppies. I mean, there were tons of poppy populations. We could see it from this part of the little trail. There's almost nothing there right now. So I'm going to walk around and see if I can find poppies and see if I can find the Mojave Poppy Bee. Wish me luck. So last year, right along this bench, there were a ton of poppies blooming. And I've walked around a little bit and I haven't seen anything blooming. Right here, we have a dead poppy plant. Right here, there's one that's alive, obviously not blooming. It's pretty crazy to think that last year I was walking back and forth and there was literally hundreds of plants. And this year, there's almost nothing. So, I mean, naturally, the desert is pretty variable in terms of what's blooming from year to year. And so the bees have adapted to that. But I'm wondering if the variability has become more extreme, like a lot of other things related to our climate. So there's another plant that looks like it's barely struggling to stay alive this year. There is a little one, probably a seedling. Oops. And some other. So the plants are still here. But not doing too well. It has been super dry this year. And one of the things down about this kind of desert region down here is when it rains, it's really patchy. So maybe on that side of the valley, they might get a good rainstorm, and over here, they might get nothing. And so they have had a little bit of rain this winter and spring, just a little bit. And apparently this population mostly got missed. So I don't know what that means for the bees and for the poppies themselves, but I guess time will tell. So I have been walking around here. I just hiked up this area. Down there is where we were seeing all the poppies last year. There is nothing blooming right now. It is super, super dry. Even some of the other like shrubs and things that were blooming last year. So my wife spent a lot of time last week. She was looking down here. I just FaceTimed with her because she's at a different site right now. And she said to go look down there. So my son was with her last week and he had a little counter. He was counting poppies at each population. And this one had some of the fewest. I think he only counted less than 50 total plants blooming here. So let's go see if we can find those plants. So I have been walking around looking for any blooming poppies, and finally I found one. See if I can point to it. It's right there. And then in the distance, there's a few more over there. So I'm gonna get over to them and see if any bees have found them. This one's in full bloom. When I walked up, there was a honeybee on it, but being kind of cloudy like it is, there's not a lot of bee activity in general. So I finally did see a honeybee. The sun started to come out and insects started flying, but still not very much activity on these plants. So a lot of surveying for bees on these poppies requires me to just sit and wait quite a bit. So I sped this little video up 3 times its actual speed, but you can see much of the time surveying for bees here is watching a plant, waiting for a pollinator to come. Okay, I've been out here for a few hours now. I ended up finding a few poppy plants. Not much activity on them. I saw one sweat bee and a handful of honeybees, but overall, this population is not doing too well as far as the poppies go. And even though Beehive Dome here is the only place where Perdita meconis, the Mojave Poppy Bee, has been found in Utah in the past, like 30 years ago, I still haven't seen it here. And I don't know. So I'm heading back to the car. So now it's day 2. I came out to some poppy populations that are kind of near the Bear Claw Poppy Bike Trail. This is a little bit farther out into the desert. Lindsay came here last week and found that there were some pretty healthy flower populations here. It was kind of windy this morning and kind of chilly, about 60 degrees, so I spent some time looking around. Finally started to see some bees when the sun came out. This is a honeybee. I also started seeing some sweat bees. But as I surveyed these poppies, I noticed, like in the other populations, some of the plants looked really healthy, and other ones that were just a few meters away were really struggling to survive this year. So the drought has been hard. Overall, I didn't see a lot of bees. There's a crab spider with a little sweat bee. There's a lot of crab spiders in these flowers and not very many bees. Here's a small sweat bee I saw, several of these in fact. And as the day warmed up, I saw more and more. Here's a flower with 2 of them in it. So these are all Lasioglossum in the subgenus Dialictus. So a lot of good poppies at this site. I caught a couple bees. There was some honeybees and some small sweat bees in the subgenus Dialictus. That's about it. On some of the indigo bush, there was a couple of other bees. There's some digger bees and some fairy bees, but not the one we're looking for. So I'm going to drive down the road farther to where the bike trail is. There's another subpopulation of poppies that I want to check out, but it looks like at least the Mojave Poppy Bee wasn't here today. Hey guys, so this is day 3. I'm out here at a population they call the Webb Hill population. You can see there's some poppies right here on the wrong side of the fence. There's a fence right there to kind of fence off where the poppies are. One of the biggest threats to these poppy areas is development. I don't know if you can see down the road or you hear that. There's a lot of construction going on here. St. George area is just growing like crazy. And so a lot of these places that have been kind of out of the way, where these poppies have been growing for thousands of years on these interesting soils, they are becoming houses. So if I turn around this way, you can see there's just houses and houses and houses, and they're building more just down the road. And while it might not be the houses necessarily directly that are affecting the poppies, you can see right through these 3 plants, there's this track. Someone rode their motorcycle through these hills. Probably really fun, but if they're not aware of these endangered plants. So the real question is, what about the bees? We don't know anything about the nesting habits of the Mojave Poppy Bee, so we don't know if it nests in these soils right by the poppies, which is most likely, or maybe they're nesting somewhere else. So without knowing that, it's hard to make efforts to protect the bee. Some of these plants here are just beautiful in full bloom, but I have seen nothing on them so far, not even honeybees. Last week, my wife did find a small fairy bee on one of these that had been killed by a crab spider. It wasn't the Mojave Poppy Bee that we've been looking for, but there's still hope. This is a really healthy poppy population. You can kind of see them shining out there in the distance, but there are hundreds of blooming poppies right now. I've walked out, I don't know, maybe a half a mile, and I've seen a bunch of really healthy looking plants, and I have seen absolutely 0 bees. So great population for the poppies. There's even small 2nd-year plants, and there's seedlings that are coming up. So this poppy population is doing great. I wish I could find some bees on it. So the area where Lindsay was collecting, the poppies were pretty much finished blooming. There was not a lot of buds or fresh flowers there. So she came out here to help me check this area out. We didn't find a whole lot of bees, a lot of really healthy looking plants, a lot of pollen in those flowers, but no bees really. Kind of interesting. So me and my son loaded up some camping stuff in the truck and headed down south to Nevada. Hey everybody, so my wife's gonna finish collecting those plots down in St. George, down around Washington County, Utah. We came out here to Gold Butte National Monument to meet some colleagues that are studying the Mojave Poppy Bee on different poppy populations out here, especially in Gold Butte National Monument. So we're coming out here in the evening. It's a nice sunset back there in the distance. Look at that. Nice sunset back there. Anyway, we're gonna come and camp out here so we can get up super early in the morning and see if we can find some of the Mojave Poppy Bees. That's the plan. So we got to the campsite, met with our colleagues just as they were eating dinner, spent a couple hours chatting and talking about bees. In the morning, we got up pretty early and left to go out to the poppy restoration area where we had collected at last year. Big thanks to Aravada Springs for letting us camp there. So we went to the restoration site. If you remember from last year, this is the same spot where me and Isaac and Vivian came and found hundreds of bees. So this is the same area where I came down last year and found Perdita meconis, the Mojave Poppy Bee. There was hundreds of poppies blooming. This year, it's pretty dry. We've seen one poppy plant. I'm gonna head right over there by that rock. There's one other poppy plant I see. There's one of the few poppies that's blooming. I just walked up to it. I don't see any bees on it, but I'll keep looking. So last year, it seemed like every bloom had multiple bees on it. These are the Mojave Poppy Bee from last year. You can see there's several males flying around. There's females in foraging on the flower. We even found several mating pairs. This year, in the exact same location, or plus or minus a couple meters, Not very many flowers, but even on these flowers, just no bees whatsoever. So we decided to head back to the vehicles. Our colleagues are going to head back out into the monument to look for other bees at other poppy populations. Me and Isaac are heading home. Okay guys, so we are calling it a day. We found nothing. It's been super dry out here, so we found a couple poppies, but there was just nothing on them. Isaac actually caught one sweat bee on one of the poppies, but none of the Perdita meconis. What's interesting is we went to the exact same spot that we went to last year, and last year there was hundreds of bees, mating pairs and other things like that, but this year there's nothing. So either the bees all stayed underground this year because it was so dry, or they just came out really briefly and we missed the window. I'm not sure. So hopefully we get to come back next year and find more. We'll see.